The main news of the evening now on BBC One with Peter Sissons at 8:30.
The Commons votes for an inquiry into the allegations of questions for cash. One of the two Conservative MPs involved apologises to the House for his lack of judgment. The tide of reform reaches Whitehall. Thousands of civil service jobs will go. And a fifth strike, a few more trains and no end in sight to the weekly disruption. Good evening. The House of Commons has voted to set up a committee of senior backbenchers to investigate allegations that two Conservative MPs were willing to ask parliamentary questions in return for money. The committee will also examine the issues it raises. The two MPs, Graham Riddick and David Tredinnick, have already been suspended from their junior posts in the government, but deny any wrongdoing. The Sunday Times has insisted that having a reporter pose as a businessman and offer MPs £1,000 to table a Commons question was entirely justified journalistically. Mr. Riddick told the House tonight that he'd sent his cheque back by return of post. He welcomed having MPs sit in judgment on him and not the press.
As many of that opinion say aye. Aye. To the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it.
No counting was needed after a debate that was sometimes raucous, sometimes sombre. MPs are nervous that checks for questions allegations have fed public cynicism about Parliament, fostering an impression of sleaze. One of those accused was swift to prostrate himself before his fellow members.
The thing which has mortified me the most is that my judgment may have undermined the general standing of members of Parliament and even perhaps have damaged the reputation of this Parliament.
It'll be for the committee itself to decide how much wider to take its deliberations into the whole question of MPs being paid as consultants and whether they should be forced to declare how much they get for doing what.
There's all the difference in the world between being paid tuppence and £1 million to do something, and the amount that people get for their non-parliamentary duties should be explicitly in the register for everybody to see.
Some Labour MPs sprang to the defence of the Sunday Times, the paper whose undercover journalism provoked the whole furore, and whose role is also expected to be examined by the Privileges Committee.
The Sunday Times has done British democracy a favour in this investigation, exposing such gross behaviour that needs to be scrutinised by the House of Commons.
But many Tories were bitter in their condemnation of what they called entrapment by the offering of bribes and bugging within the Westminster precincts, including one who turned down the money offered.
Are we now to tolerate a secret, self-appointed journalistic police answerable only to the commercial imperatives of the transatlantic Rupert Murdoch?
MPs now recognise the need to clarify the rules governing the uneasy overlap between their public duties and their private business affairs. As Labour's Nick Brown said, the register of MPs' interests has become more licensed than safeguard. But changes are likely to take time. Robin Oakley, BBC News, Westminster.
The government has put forward radical reforms for the civil service, which are expected to bring many redundancies and an end to job security for senior officials. The Public Service Minister, William Waldegrave, said the changes would make the civil service more flexible, but critics accused him of trying to sell it off. The government's civil service white paper includes proposals for cutting an estimated 50,000 jobs, opening up appointments to senior posts to outside competition and extending performance-related pay.
Time is running out for a hugely secure way of life for civil servants. The changes will affect everyone from the lowliest pen pusher up to senior mandarins like Andrew Turnbull, the permanent secretary of the Department of Environment, in one of the most dramatic shake-ups seen in the civil service. In the Commons this afternoon, the minister responsible said no organisation could stand still in changing times.
The civil service has a unique role, maintaining our unwritten constitution. It does not belong to one government or party. The government therefore plans to consult opposition parties as well as others with an interest in the proposals as I have outlined today.
But Labour sees something altogether more insidious in the changes.
This
statement is a menu for accelerated privatization of the civil service, which threatens to destroy the constitutional principles on which the civil service has rested for 150 years.
The bulk of job losses will come from the transfer of departmental activities to private or semi-private agencies. The unions are furious.
We're not against efficiency. We've always cooperated with efficiency. This is not about getting efficiency. It's about selling off the civil service.
There's also concern that with individual contracts and performance-related pay, the most senior mandarins will be subject to strong political pressures.
The essential protection against that is that the recruitment should not be done by the politician. And what the government has said today is that the recruitment should be done as it's been done over the last 150 years by the independent civil service commissioners who do it on merit.
William Watergrave is at pains to stress that what he's proposing strikes a balance between change and continuity, but the unions are deeply worried that this is the slippery slope towards politicising civil servants, and that change for change's sake is riding roughshod over old-fashioned principles of impartiality. John Sopel, BBC News, Westminster.
Most of the rail network has again been at a standstill because of a fifth signalman's strike. British Rail say they managed to run about one train in 5, though many carried very few passengers. Tomorrow, the leaders of the Signal Workers Union, the RMT, will discuss escalating the dispute.
About 3,000 trains ran today, a fifth of the normal. Railtrack organises non-striking managers more effectively each strike, part of a battle for the public heart and mind. Even where trains were barely used, it was deemed worthwhile.
We didn't expect a lot of people to travel today. Obviously there is still an air of uncertainty, but as I say, it's really a gesture to them, to the customers, to say, look, you've stuck with us on non-strike days, we're going to do what we can to run a service.
There was some inducement for the public in the middle. British Rail had publicised routes. Passengers were lured by free coffee.
That's free today, compliments of British Rail.
They're giving you a cheap ticket as well, a cup of coffee, it's very good. First in 78 years that I've had a present off British Rail.
In the big rail strikes of the early 80s, it was a very different battle for the public mind. Pickets were loathed then, sometimes attacked. The terrain of the propaganda battle has changed. Polls over the decades show that unions are not now seen as too powerful. In this strike, Railtrack started badly, with the union flaunting a Railtrack memo that talked of an offer it had denied making. Its stance has sometimes appeared confused. It leads a conservative PR guru to criticism.
They misread the way the public perceived the unions, because Jimmy Knapp was a dinosaurial relic of the old days, but he's come out looking good and looking almost statesmanlike.
Of course, the public may yet round on today's strikers. Attitudes have changed, but the dinosaur image might not be completely dead. All the same, the undoubted shift in attitudes makes it much harder to predict who would feel the backlash if the public did finally turn. In the meantime, the cost of the taxpayer mounts. British Rail says each strike costs it £10 million, reaching a running total of £50 million and rising with little sign of peace. Stephen Evans, BBC News.
The number of people out of work and claiming benefit has fallen for the 5th month in a row. The seasonally adjusted figure for June is just over 2,640,000. That's a drop of almost 19,000. And inflation was unchanged in June at 2.6%. The leader of the Bosnian Serbs has refused to support the latest peace plan. Radovan Karadzic said he would make no recommendation to his Bosnian Serb Assembly, which meets on Monday. The Foreign Secretary Douglas Hurd and his French counterpart Alain Juppé have warned that rejection would leave the Serbs totally isolated.
They came to Bosnia knowing that neither side likes the Geneva plan, but that the Serb side likes it least of all. It was a plan, they said, to keep Bosnia together within its existing borders.
It is sometimes described as a plan of partition. It is not a plan of partition. It is a plan which provides for the integrity of those borders.
They took the same message to the mountainous headquarters of the Bosnian Serbs and got a frosty response. The Serbs reject the existing borders. The war for them has been fought to redraw them. They want nothing short of international status, sovereignty for their ethnic mini-state. For them, Bosnia-Herzegovina no longer exists.
If, as seems likely, the Serbs reject this plan, it will set the international community on a completely new path, a path the British have resisted from the beginning, that leads to the lifting of the arms embargo, the withdrawal of United Nations troops, and the resumption of full-scale war here.
These, Mr. Hurd insisted, were the decisive few days between war and peace.
If the opportunity is lost, then the way back to darkness and war is very quick and very disastrous.
Tonight in Belgrade, they appealed to the Serbian President Slobodan Milosevic to use his influence. The Bosnian Serb leadership was, after all, his creation, but the evidence is he has built a monster he no longer controls. Alan Little, BBC News, Sarajevo.
A British couple who've been arrested in Romania are expected to be charged with trying to smuggle a baby out of the country. Adrian and Bernadette Mooney from Wokingham in Berkshire were detained a week ago while trying to cross the border into Hungary. They're now being held at a Bucharest police station. The couple are alleged to have paid several £1,000s for a baby girl. A Pentagon report says human error and organizational failures caused American jets to shoot down 2 of their own helicopters over Iraq last April. Disciplinary action may now be taken against those involved. All 26 aboard the helicopters, including 2 British officers, were killed. The jet pilots believed the helicopters were Iraqi, violating the no-fly zone. A committee of MPs has concluded that videos can corrupt the young and could lead vulnerable children to commit crime. In a report published today, the Home Affairs Select Committee recommends that violent films already passed by the film censors should be reclassified if they cause great public anxiety.
MPs rule out a link between the video Child's Play 3 and the murder of Jamie Bulger, but still conclude that violence on video can be one of the causes of criminal behaviour among some young people. Such material shouldn't be banned altogether, but the report suggests tougher action to protect children. The way should be opened for reclassifying existing videos, with the public given time to complain about individual titles. Warning notices should be put in shops about the risk of children seeing adult videos. There should be more research into the viewing habits of young offenders to find out if they've been influenced by what they've seen.
Well, the main issue is how far you should restrict the civil liberties of the majority not to be censored in order to protect the civil liberties of the minority, the vulnerable classes, the children, and to what extent that balance should be struck.
With the experts divided on whether violent videos cause crime, the industry highlighted other factors involved.
I think it's the other influences that we need to address, that the government needs to address. Influences like bad housing, poverty, bad education, bad parenting, neglect, abuse. Those are the things that really create juvenile crime.
MPs realise that even if the problems with videos are solved, new technology is raising further questions. Satellites and computers will allow totally unrestricted material into the country. Neil Bennett, BBC News.
The aunt of Abby Humphreys, the baby kidnapped from a hospital in Nottingham nearly 2 weeks ago, has made an appeal to the abductor to telephone her. Abby was taken from the Queen's Medical Centre when she was just 4 hours old.
She needs to know that she's gaining weight. She needs to know all the things that a mother would care about. Please phone the police. Please let them know and let me know. Let me tell Karen that her baby is safe.
And the number to call is Nottingham 0602 810 567. That's 0602 810 567. Football, Norwich City have announced they've accepted £5 million bids from 2 unnamed clubs for their 21-year-old striker Chris Sutton. Arsenal and Blackburn are believed each to have offered what will be a record fee paid by a British club. Now it's up to Sutton to decide which club he'll join.
An eventful day for Chris Sutton. This afternoon he was confirmed by his chairman as the subject of a British transfer record, but he'd spent the early hours involved in a nightclub row and an act of petty vandalism to a car, ending up cautioned by Norwich police but not charged. Sutton. It's Arsenal, or as seems more likely, Blackburn Rovers, who will be. Some £5 million for the services of an England under-21 international whose goals last season made his transfer away from Norwich inevitable.
I mean, all the speculation, Chris, has been about Blackburn Rovers.
Yep.
Fancy going there?
I'll have to wait and see. Well, if they are one of the clubs who have come in, I'll just see what they offer and sit down and talk.
We're very fortunate to have two clubs to have accepted the challenge we laid down.
Are those
and we
two
have
clubs Arsenal and Blackburn?
And we have two other clubs that are still talking to us.
The question remained unanswered, but the suspicion is that Sutton's choice has already been made for Blackburn. Rob Bonnet, BBC News.
And that's it from the newsroom. Good night.
Good evening. Drug abuse and drug dealing at a Northwest jail needs to be tackled without delay. That's the view of the Chief Inspector of Prisons. Some inmates at Haverick Jail in Cumbria have had to be segregated for their own safety because they've run up large drugs debts.
2/3 of the inmates at Haverick Prison are still housed in old converted RAF huts, which the inspectors say are a haven for drug trafficking. Drugs are obtained from visitors during home leave and in parcels thrown over the fence. There's a recorded case of LSD having been sent through the post. It's accepted that the lower category C security means drug abuse is more likely.
Yes, I think that's true. But nevertheless, the view we took was that the amount of drugs around, hard drugs as well as soft, was excessive.
The inspectors were particularly concerned that 33 inmates convicted of possessing and supplying drugs had been moved to Haverick. Their report concludes that practice should end.
Lancashire police have begun a murder inquiry after the body of a 25-year-old woman was found at a house in Burnley. Detectives say that Carol Clark was sexually assaulted, then beaten and stabbed to death. Her naked body was found wrapped in a carpet in the backyard of number 10 Pritchard Street. She'd been renting the house opposite. The police want to trace a blue transit van seen in the street over the last few days. Merseyside has been given the go-ahead to spend more than £6 million of aid from Brussels. The European Commission has approved a huge investment programme for the area, which has been officially designated one of the poorest in Europe. More than half the money will be used for training programmes to serve new local businesses. There'll also be money for existing companies, as well as environmental improvements. And that's it. Our next bulletin will be at just before 6:30 in the morning on BBC One. From us all, good night. John Ketley has the weather.
Good evening to you. If you're planning a trip to the coastline over the next few days, you won't be too disappointed. Plenty of warm sunshine in store. And certainly a much better night tonight for getting to sleep. We've lost those thunderstorms across the southeastern corner. Still a bit tacky around London, about 15 degrees being the minimum temperature. But in parts of the north, temperature down to single figures, about 7 to 9. Fairly clear skies then in many parts of the country, but some drizzly rain returning to those northwestern areas as the night goes on. An overhang of cloud and rather misty, dreary conditions through East Anglia and the southeast. Well, tomorrow we'll find this weather system brushing through Scotland and Northern Ireland very gingerly as the day goes on, but plenty of sunshine to come ahead of it. That band of cloud and occasional rain pushing southwards into northern England, much of Wales and the far southwest, in fact, by the end of tomorrow evening, with clearer weather following on behind. But plenty of sunshine to come tomorrow, especially over England and Wales. Rather a grey start perhaps in the extreme southeast and East Anglia, and even here there could be the odd shower developing into the afternoon, but most places staying dry. The heavier, more persistent rain always likely to be over western Scotland and parts of Northern Ireland, where it'll be breezy, a bit cool at 17, but further south 22 to 25. Not to be sniffed at all. That weather system moving southwards on Friday is a very weak feature, no more than a band of cloud and a little rain. Some places staying dry across the south, plenty of sunshine down here along the south coast. Plenty of sunshine following on behind, but there will be 1 or 2 showers, perhaps on Friday, up in the far north of Scotland. We're all in the same boat on Saturday, though, a glorious day, I think. Lots of sunshine around, temperatures ranging from about 19 over the north to 23 in the south. Enjoy it if you can. Bye for now.